Cool.
Yeah. Well, but what happened was he ended up moving back to California though, right?
Sherry passed away. She contracted cancer and passed away. And that kind of sent him for a loop. They were a committed couple, and he kind of got lost for a little bit. He would come in and see me and kind of mope around and just couldn't really get back on his feet. He ended up meeting another woman. And I actually ran into them in Walmart, and he made a point to drag her over and introduce her to me, and told me at that point he thought that they were going to move back out to California. They moved, probably within the next 6 months. I think they moved out to Fresno, and he was out there for a couple of years before he passed away. So.
And I like so for our listeners, Wayne took the time to send us some stories in writing, which is kind of unusual for our guests.
But they also sound like police reports. On such and such a date, I was in my mobile crime fighting platform, approached the violator.
That's because he knew he was sending them to you and me. Yeah. We'd understand it better. But this one on Brian, I love the way that you ended it. And I mean, it shows compassion. Even though this guy's a former biker and a former criminal, Brian got free of the criminals he had run with in his youth. He worked hard, loved his wife and kids, and supported them the best he could. He started life rough, and he lived rough. But in the end, I think he found his way to being a good man. I mean, brother, that's unusual to hear a lifelong cop say that about individuals, but it just shows that all these years later, with all the crap you've seen over the past,
37 years. Yeah.
I mean, you still have compassion in your heart for your fellow man. And that's why most people get in law enforcement. It's not to go out there and be Billy Badass or try to pretend to be a tough guy. Cops just want to be cops to help other people.
You bet. It's, I've said almost all my career, I mean, I can arrest people all day long. I mean, I could walk out of the hotel here with some guys here in Hot Springs and we could put people in jail today.
One small problem, though, you're not commissioned in Arkansas, right? So
no, I'd do some work with some of the guys that are here, but
just a minor detail.
So I'm back home, and when I get back home, I could put people in jail all day long, if that's the goal. But if you're not trying to make a difference, if you're not trying to change the way people behave, then what's the point? I mean, all you're doing.
A Midwest thing, though. But I think it's maybe not a Midwest, but it's also a small town thing, because if you're in LA, New York, you might see some person in a small area over and over again. But chances are, I mean, you don't deal with a lot of those folks over and over again because you don't live in that area, you don't work in that area. But when you're in Claremore, when you're in even if you're in Broken Arrow, or if you're in, whatever it is, you got to live in that community too. So it's about making that community better. It's about,
absolutely.
Hey, if we can make you a better person, it's going to make my community safer. Guess what? At the end of the day, like I said, you could arrest your way through it, but then you're out in public, you're running into Walmart, going out to eat. And guess what? You're running into these people all over again. And so I think it's kind of a small town Midwest thing too, where it's not like I could arrest you, but is there a better way around this? Can we figure out something to do to where, like you said, like with Brian, he becomes a better person because of it?
Well, and small town Oklahoma. My career's kind of been unique for that agency, to say the least. I mean, I've had the opportunity to. I worked bank fraud cases and wire fraud cases with FBI. I've worked gun cases with ATF. I've got some real good friends that work there. I've bought dope with DEA and everybody just kind of relies on one another depending on what the case is. But in the end, you're right, Morgan. I mean, I run into these people at Walmart. I run into them at the grocery store, or at the lumber yard. My family has adapted pretty well. That if we're in a store someplace and somebody walks up to me and starts talking to me and I don't introduce them, They understand that's probably somebody they don't need to know, and they go do something else while I deal with the issue. It wasn't very long into my career that it kind of hits you in the face a little bit. I would see somebody in somewhere in public and start talking to them, and knowing, okay, they're asking me questions and they're being friendly with me, and we're having a normal conversation, but I've made a case on their son or their daughter or their nephew, and I know that in about 2 or 3 weeks their world is going to turn upside down, and it's going to change dramatically. And what I'm trying to, the goal there is, yes, to solve that problem, stop them from dealing dope, stop them from stealing things, stop them from doing whatever they're doing. But at the same time, recognizing that while that's going to happen, that person is still their son or their daughter or their, whatever their relationship is, and knowing that these people are going to have a really hard time with that. They're going to, it's going to cost them money because they're going to have to help with attorneys or a bondsman, or just they're going to come to court for their whatever their kinship is with this person. They're going to end up in court with these people. They're going to see me on the opposite side of that, and
and then they're going to go, I just saw you 2 weeks ago. Why didn't you say something?
Why didn't you say something? Or 6 months after that, or a year after that, we just finally got through this case. We just finally got a disposition on this case, and I'm going to run into them in Walmart again. And so how are they going to approach me that time? I mean, I've got a bunch of people that over the years, they've chosen not to continue a friendly relationship, and I understand why. But I also have a lot of people that are, that still come up and talk to me after I've put their son or daughter in prison. And I think some of that's because of the way you treat people from the beginning. I mean, I'll do my best to try to treat those folks with the dignity they allow me to. I mean,
sometimes it's not totally in your control. Sometimes it's up to them. You can only go so far, but folks, you got to help me out here. If you're not going to meet me halfway, this is going to go south. We tell them, I can ask you to do it, I can tell you to do it, or I can make you do it. Right.
Right. Exactly.
It's easier when I ask you and we work together.
You bet. And so back to Brian and Sherry, they were just people that allowed that to happen. They were willing, again, they tried to work. I say they tried. They did work. They contributed to the community as best they could. I think they both, in a sense, were a little bit handicapped in that how they came into this world. I mean, they didn't have some of the opportunities that a lot of other people have. But they tried to make the best of what they did have. And they had kids. They wanted to see them succeed and do well, and like everybody does. And they just made a better effort at it than other people might try. I mean, they just wanted to do the right thing. So
did Brian invite you to her funeral?
No, he didn't. He didn't invite me to the funeral. Actually, I found out that she'd been in the hospital after she passed away. He did call me, though. He called me and told me that she had passed. I don't know that they had much more than just a family service, though. I mean, they were, again, not people. They didn't have a lot of money. They just made do with what they had. So I don't know that they had a big service for her.
Well, we kind of go from somebody like this, people who are, you do your best, they end up being able to live in society and not become future problems. But then you deal with somebody like Darlene Lorenz and Jerry Hill. And those are ones like, you enjoy putting folks like that. Those are the ones you enjoy putting in jail.
Darlene and Jerry, that's a completely different situation. And they needed to be put in jail. There's no question.
Well, let's talk about that, because this is one almost went south on you too, and not because of what you did. But let's talk about that too, because this kind of gets to the opposites, right? There are some people who it's like, no, I'm sorry, this one, there's no, we're not going to have a kumbaya. We're not going to have, warm showers in the morning together, like Clint Eastwood said, in Heartbreak Ridge.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what.
Well, no, these guys violated our first rule. What's the first rule?
Don't do meth.
Don't do meth.
Oh, yeah.
Rule number 1, Game of Crimes, don't do meth. See, we're choking Wayne up, man. He knows too. He's at a narcotics conference, and we're talking about don't do meth. It's like
Don't
rule
do
number
meth.
1.
Absolutely. That was, I had actually been in court that day. I was in a pair of slacks and a sport coat and a tie, and I got a call.
White sport coat and a pink carnation.
They're not quite, but close enough.
The old country song goes.
Yeah. I'd been in court, and I got a call from a guy named Lance Ramsey, who worked for the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office. And he and I had been in the police academy together. We were in the same class, and Lance called and said, "Hey, I've got a warrant on Darlene Lorenz for possession of a sawed-off shotgun, failure to appear on a possession of a sawed-off shotgun case. She's a convicted felon and somebody that I knew. My boss at the time is a man named John Cummings. He and I had worked more than one informant trying to get into a position to buy meth from her in the past, and so she was kind of a known quantity. We knew she was a bad gal, and she was a target for a lot of folks. But so Lance told me that she was working in his area. I'm sorry. Lance told me that not that she was working in his area. Lance told me that he had a warrant for her that had been issued by the Tulsa District Court, and he believed that she was staying in a motel in Claremore. And the motel he was talking about, actually, it was a place called the Elms, and it was almost like a pre-release center for the state Department of Corrections. Everybody comes out of prison and goes and stays in the Elms for a little while before they move on.
So not your 5-star resort that you're going to get valet service and no.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I'm not even sure they could spell valet, but that and in fact that motel doesn't even exist anymore. It's somebody came through and bought the property and knocked it down, and thank goodness. But the proprietor, the guy that owned the place, a guy named Tommy Kopp, and if you worked at the police department for very long at all, everybody knew Tommy. So we went to the motel, and actually, so I meet Lance and a couple of his guys at a restaurant parking lot just down the street from the motel, and we go through the particulars and figure out what we think's going on. And Lance and I go over to the motel and meet Tommy and look at the registry at the motel, and sure enough, there is a guy that Lance knows is an associate with he's a friend of Darlene's. His name is on the registry, so we assume that's probably where they're at. I end up calling a friend of mine who's working a patrol shift at the time, a guy named Keith Heskett. He and I have known each other since high school, and we worked patrol shift together when I first started, and then after I'd been in investigations, I became the sergeant in investigations for a while. When he had an opportunity, I brought him over and brought him into the investigations unit, and then he actually works with me now at the district attorney's office. He's retired from the PD and has come on with me at the DA's office. So I call Keith and because I need some extra help. And when he shows up, I tell him what we're doing. We're going to go back to this particular room. Lance and the guys that are with him are going to go cover the back in case these guys try to get out. And Keith and I are going to go to the front door. And so now, being the bright young man that I am at the time, I'm in a sport coat and a tie. I don't have a vest on. I'm not marked. I'm just, I don't know. I look like I stepped out of court. But I'm going to go, we're going to go confront this lady who's wanted for failure to appear on a possession of sawed-off shotgun charge. And I'm not, I don't know. I guess at the time, maybe I'm thinking I got a S on my chest and a cape on, I can't get hurt.
Which means you weren't wearing any body armor.
You bet. Exactly. Not the brightest.
I've never done that before.
Yeah. Not the brightest guy in the world. So we're walking up to the door and they have an awning that extends away from the building about 15 feet. And we hit the awning and I can smell the meth lab. I can smell the odor of the meth lab coming out of the apartment because the door to the motel room is open about 6 or 8 inches. It's just standing kind of a jar. And I smelled that and it's like, golly, it just kind of takes the wind out of your sails because, all right, that's at that time, that's another 12 hours worth of work that I know we're going to put in. And it's about 3:30 in the afternoon. So, I'm not making it home for dinner. That's for sure.
Did you think about maybe just striking a match and throwing it in there and then coming back the next day?
Trust me. A little bit later, that thought crossed my mind and at least the consequences of that thought crossed my mind. So we're walking up to that thing and I'm smelling that odor and, I'd been in enough of those labs by then that, it was the old red phosphorus or anhydrous ammonia stuff. And just the smell of that would give me a headache. And golly, I was just so frustrated. Now we got to do all this. We got to deal with this garbage.
Well, not to mention how volatile that stuff is. I mean, that's explosive.
Absolutely. And she's there. Okay, so it's not the world's greatest motel, but they're back in the midst of all these other rooms. There are people on both sides now,
and nobody called it in. Nobody called in the smell, saying, "Hey, I think there's a meth lab next door."
Yeah, no. Most of the people that would have been there would have probably been customers. Yeah. So we're walking up to the door. There's a window to the left of the front door, and Keith says, "Man, I'm going to go. I'll catch the window." And I said, "Okay, that's great." I walk up to the door and I look inside, and there is a man. This Jerry Hill. I don't know him at the time, but he's sitting on the corner of the bed. He's got his elbows on his knees. And he's got his head in his hands. He's just kind of sitting there. And Darlene is laying on the bed. She's got her head on a pillow and her hands under the pillow. And I knew Darlene. I knew exactly who she was. And so when I saw her, okay, so we're at the right place. There's no question. And at that point, with the meth lab odor and all that stuff, whether it's the right people or not, we're committed. We got to deal with this. So I got my gun in my hand. I knock on the door, and as when I knocked on the door, it slides open another 6 or 8 inches, and Jerry raises his head up. He looks at the door, and of course, I got my pistol pointed at him, and hey, show me your hands. And he immediately, his hands come up, and there's no question, and Darlene looks at me, and I tell her, Darlene, I'm the police, show me your hands. And she doesn't move. She's just laying there looking at me. And
now, does she look like she's tweaking or anything else, or she just got one of those 1,000-yard stares going?
Okay. So Darlene had been doing dope so long at that point that
it's hard to tell.
It was kind of hard to tell. Life had been pretty rough on her, and she had that, a typical prankster kind of look, a typical tweaker look. Her cheeks were sunken in, and kind of almost emaciated to a point. But she just, kind of a 1,000-yard stare, sort of. She's just more looking through me than looking at me. And so I'm continuing to tell her, Darlene, show me your hands. Show me your hands. And while that's going on, there is a fog in the room that's hanging from about 2 feet down from the ceiling of that motel room. It's just kind of hanging in the air. And you can smell the ether and all the acetone and all that. And while I'm yelling at her to show me your hands and telling Jerry to stay where he's at, I'm thinking, if I have to squeeze off around in this thing, we're all going to the moon. This whole place is going to go up. This is bad. This is not a great place to be. And especially with just me standing at the front door, this is not a cool thing. Show me your hands. Show me your hands. And she's just, you can tell the wheels finally start turning. She is thinking about what she should be doing. But nothing's moving quickly, and everything slows down. Show me your hands. Show me your hands. I have gotten to the point that I've got the front side of my gun pointed at the bridge of her nose. I've taken up the slack in the trigger. I'm telling her, I am on the point of she's going to make the wrong move, and I am going to shoot her in the face.
That's why I say you're about a half an ounce away of trigger pull from blowing up the whole damn place.
Yeah. We're gonna clear the motel property right there.
Hey, you could have saved that guy a bunch of money. The one who came in and bought it and raised it later. Hey, I blew it up for you.
Yeah. That thing was so full of asbestos, we would have created an EPA site right there. Just blah. But so I'm yelling at her. I mean, it's obviously it's really tense. I'm yelling at her. I'm amped up. Show me your hands. Show me your hands. She's not moving. And finally, she starts to move. The hands start to come out from under the pillow. And Keith has been watching from the window. And when she starts moving, he sings out. He yells out, "She's moving." And when he says that, she stops. And it's like, okay, now she's recycling. She's okay, there's more than one. What do I do? What do I do? And I'm still yelling at her, show me your hands, give me your hands. That goes on. It seems like forever. She finally decides to bring her hands out from under the pillow. And when she does, she sets up. She takes her hands out of the pillow. She sets up on the bed. And Keith comes in with me, and we get them both handcuffed. And God, I mean, you can't hardly even stay in that place. The smell's so hard. Get them up off the bed, throw the pillow over, and there is a 9mm on one side of the pillow and a .22 Magnum on the other side of the pillow. And so she had both hands on handguns, and I, to this day, I believe, had Keith not said what he said, had he not yelled when he did, there was going to be a gunfight. It might not have been a long gunfight. I felt like I was pretty prepared. I felt like I was on target pretty well. But yeah, she was going to move, and I really believe she thought she could win that and come out blazing. Interestingly enough, Jerry, the guy that was in there, was sitting in front of her. Now, he knew what she had under that pillow, and he was white as a sheet because he was between she and I, and I'm pretty sure he understood it wasn't going to turn out well for him either way. So,
well, too, it's the laws of physics, action versus reaction. Even though you're prepared, I'm glad it turned out the way it did. Not to mention you would have blown everything up. But
well, we don't know that he hasn't blown everything up, Murph. Yet we're not to the end of the story. Way to go and telling everybody the end of the story.
I think if we'd blown everything up, we probably wouldn't be having this interview today.
Yeah. Well, as it turned out, we cleared that out after we got him arrested and in custody, drug out. We secured that room. I got some more cops there, and so they sat on it. I actually took her and Jerry Keith and I both took her and Jerry to booking, and
yeah. But before you left the room, though, you looked under the pillows, right?
oh yeah.
What'd you find?
That happened while they were still there. Yeah, she had a 9mm on one. Well, there was a 9mm and a 22 Magnum under that pillow and positioned where her hands were.
Man, did you take a nap there? He told us that a while ago.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. You got to excuse him again, trooper here.
There's only so many things you can keep track of at one time. So
well, yeah, I'm trying to keep track. Look at the story, look ahead, so I can ask some probing questions. This is like a 60 Minutes interview.
There you go.
Yeah, so we got that place locked down, and I was going to have to go write a search warrant for it for the rest of the stuff that was in there. Took them to jail. We're booking them in. She had. We're walking through the questions, that everybody gets asked. Where do you live? How tall are you? Things like that. And asked her what she did for a living, and she said, "Well, what do you think I do for a living? I'm a dope dealer. What do you think I do?"
First time somebody's actually honest on those forms.
Yeah. So
you actually want to say thank you for being honest.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Appreciate your honesty. Thank you very much.
What do we have for her, Johnny, as a parting gift?
Yeah. Well, so we end up going back and doing the search warrant, executing the search warrant for the motel, and there's it's a meth lab, and there's more components.
Well, let's quick question about that. Because of all those chemicals and everything, did you have to call in? I mean, what did you do? Because at one time they used to have the Superfund, it had to be, it had to come out of EPA, right? I mean, but hazmat suits. What did you guys have to do to go into that hotel? Because anhydrous ammonia, I know from being a farm boy, that stuff alone will kill you. You breathe in the anhydrous, you're dead.
You bet. Well, that ended up being a red phosphorus lab. So we didn't have to deal with the anhydrous issues. But with red phosphorus, you deal with phosphine gas and all kinds of stuff that's extremely dangerous as well. We did our best to vent that thing and not stay in that room any more than we had to. But yeah, so you set up an area where you drag stuff outside and process it. You put on the little, Midas Man suits, the Tyvek covers and whatnot, so that you're not any more exposed than you have to be. And yeah, you call, our process at the time was we called DEA, and told them what we had, and DEA would dispatch a cleanup crew that would come out of Oklahoma City. And so, we were there for a couple of hours minimum, just waiting on those guys to show up. They would come and, they're putting all this stuff in barrels full of vermiculite and stuff that absorbs anything that spills and tries to keep it as inert as possible. But we've also got, back then when in our little area, when an ounce of meth was a huge deal. I mean, of course now everybody's got a pound, but, there were 2 or 3 ounces of meth in that motel room, and they had a bunch of pharmaceuticals. They had some Dilaudid and some Percocet and things like that were packaged that they were selling as well. And then a bunch of, like I said, components, a bunch of other chemicals that they had purchased to make more meth in the future. And then there was another gun on the other side of the bed. So they were, that was just the business they were in, and they were ready. So,
well, the fun part though is going to trial, right? But she also made a couple other remarks to you, because if I remember right, she was, according to your notes, right, she was at least involved. Her name came up in a murder investigation prior. Yes,
her name came up in a murder that had occurred probably 10 years before that. And she told us while we were booking her in that we had a gun that belonged to her that was used in the murder. And when she bonded out, she wanted that gun back. And it's like,
okay,
man.
Let's walk through the brilliance of this statement, because she's really stupid, which she doesn't seem like really stupid, just she's criminally smart, but was she doing that just like as a threat, or was she doing it just to mess with you, or just to kind of let you know, I know, I was involved in this, but you can't prove shit?
I think she's doing a little bit of all of that. I mean, she's trying to tell us, make sure that we understand that this isn't her first rodeo. That she's somebody that's not just kind of involved in this lifestyle. She's buried in it. She's deep into this. And
did you ever think though about the legality of, so you want your pistol back, so you go get it out of there, you release it, you sign for it. The minute she touches it, then you charge her with possession of a gun, because that's not entrapment. She asked you for it.
We kind of just laughed it off. I mean, we knew, we knew her history, we knew what was going on. That obviously that's never going to happen. She's not going to get that gun back. We're not even going to consider that. But just
that would be a fun thing.
Oh yeah, well. You have to be creative in this job sometimes. And so, yeah, that wouldn't be the first time something similar to that had actually happened, but yeah.
Your Honor, it's not entrapment. She asked for the weapon back. We complied.
She wanted it. We gave it to her. It's not my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And then we seized it again.
Yeah. So yeah, she was really brash and just in your face about that kind of stuff. And that was who she was. She'd been running loose and kind of, well, she was one of the go-to people for meth in the area for quite a while. So,
well, let's talk about this trial, though, because you had a brilliant criminal defense attorney. I like your question.
Oh, God,
I wouldn't want to be represented by this guy either.
Yeah. So we about a year later, we move on to trial, and they actually took us to trial. They wouldn't take a plea. They didn't have any desire to take any kind of plea agreement. So we go to trial, and we're in the midst of the trial. We've got a jury seated. We've presented some evidence. We've taken a break, and we're standing in the judge's office, kind of waiting on the judge to get ready to go back in. And the attorney's talking about some previous cases that he's been involved in, and one of them was a guy named Rex Brindley, who was Rex was an interesting character. The rumor was he built a really nice house out in rural Rogers County, actually kind of Mays County, Rogers County line area. And his claim was that if every stick it took to build that house wasn't stolen, he'd tear that thing down and build it over again. And the wooden fence around his property was painted in the yellow line highway paint. And the story I was told was that it was stolen from the Department of Transportation building in the county north of us. So another guy that didn't hide things very well.
Didn't you just love those calls too? It's like, it's not like the crime of the century, but you come over to a party and these kids, and then you'd walk in there and they've got a stop sign and a yield sign and a speed limit sign, and you go, guys, this is stolen property. You can't have this. Oh, but it's our garage, art. Sorry guys, we're the state of Kansas does not sell these things at auction.
Yeah. Rex actually he blew up a school teacher in a community in Oklahoma, in Tahlequah, trying to murder a judge, but instead killed his wife. And
the judge's wife?
Yes. And so he was doing time. He was in jail. He was in prison for life down at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. This attorney had represented him. And so he was telling me this story, and he said, of course, Rex got life. Yeah. And then he tells me another story about another case that he's working. He said, of course, that guy got life too. And as he was going on, I thought, man, I don't know if I was in that position, I don't think you're the guy I'd hire. So
I can do better than you.
Yeah.
We used to joke with some of our defense attorneys. We got along with most of them, but it's like I walked up to one guy after I testified in the preliminary hearing. I walked up, I shook his hands in front of his client. I said, hey, congratulations. You got yet another client bound over for trial. Way to go.
Yeah. There was a defense attorney in our area that was, we used to be neighbors. and he and I would have some funny conversations because he got a lot of the defendants that were in my cases. And it was kind of funny because, prior to disposition of those cases, he was a real advocate, man. Yeah, no, my client this, my client that. And then we'd get the case disposed of, and he and I would be standing at the fence talking to one another, and he'd say, "Oh yeah, no, that guy needed to go to jail. He needed to go to prison." So anyway,
so they go to. So how long does your trial last?
The trial was about 3 days. And other than the OSBI, the lab
reports and everything,
the people that had to support that, had to sponsor those. The majority of the trial was me on the stand, and it just, it went on and on and on.
What did they try? I mean, what did they try to attack you on? First of all, the door's open. You've got the smell. You're obviously a trained investigator. You know what the smell of that kind of stuff, what it leads to. What possible defense could they mount at that point?
It was interesting because it was all about proving whether or not that stuff was theirs. We got focused on at one point why there were no fingerprints that were substantiated to be theirs on any of this material. Now, interestingly enough, we did ask for fingerprints to be for latent prints to be taken from the lab on that property. I got the report back on that about 3 weeks after the trial, and their fingerprints were all over the property, but we didn't have it at the time. I don't know why we didn't pass that trial until the next docket, but we didn't. And so, but those kind of things, of course, they wanted to argue, was the door really open? Was it really open? Or did you just walk up there and push the door open? Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't closed. It was standing ajar. But that was, those kind of arguments. It was kind of silly that we were doing it, but they were bound and determined they weren't going to take a deal. They were going to take their chances with the jury, and thought that they could.
How'd that work out for them?
Yeah.
So I'm standing in the courtroom. The deliberation room for the jury is attached to the courtroom, but it's off to one side, and there's a bailiff, standing over there, sitting over there, and she and I are talking. She was at the time was a longtime girlfriend of one of my partners, and I said, man, I just wish that just once we'd go through this, and the jury would actually understand what we dealt with, would see these people for what they are, and would just give them life, so we don't have to deal with them anymore. And so we were laughing about that. Yeah, well, people don't understand, and they don't see what we see, and whatnot. So we're going back and forth about that. They finished deliberating. We come in. I'm the state's rep, so I get to be in the courtroom. I've been allowed to be in the courtroom for the entire time. And the jury comes in and renders the verdict, gives the forms to the judge, and the judge starts reading off. Okay, so they're guilty. There were 6 or 8 charges, and they're found guilty on all those. And the judge in this case was rendering the sentence, and so she sentences them to 2 life sentences for manufacturing and possession with intent. Now these 2 are multi-time felons, but they get 2 life sentences for those crimes, and those are run concurrent. Those are supposed to run at the same time. But then she gives them 3 200-year sentences for the 3 other crimes that they commit, that they're found guilty for.
And that 2 of those were weapons violations. So you got convicted felons, and then dilaudid.
Right. and then runs those 3 200-year sentences consecutive to one another and the life sentences.
So I'm going to I want to stop you there for a second, because when we hear that, and now you've been sentenced, right? They're going to appeal, but if the sentence is upheld, so you've got 2 concurrent life sentences, but then you add 200 years on top of that. Most people would think, even Murph would come to this conclusion, they're going to be in jail for the rest of they're going to be in prison for the rest of their life. I should say jail is,
well, you think so.
Yeah, those folks should be people that we don't deal with anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But as Paul Harvey says, and now for the rest of the story.
Yeah. They
this was not your last time hearing about Darlene.
No, it wasn't. And Darlene did about 10 years. I mean, she did 10 calendars, and so she spent some time in, but she was released by the Department of Corrections.
Okay. You got to stop there, and you got to explain Oklahoma. You got to tell me what's going on. How do you get 200 years on top of 2 life sentences concurrent, and you're out in 10 years?
Well, I think that they modified the sentence at some point. It was still significant, but they, so life in the Department of Corrections, that's equated to 45 years. And you're not going to get more than a life sentence. They're not going to. I don't think Department of Corrections is going to recognize more than a life sentence. So that 200-year business, really doesn't correlate to how the Department of Corrections actually treats it. And then, I actually was reading an article about the State Department of Corrections. And how they compute good time and how much time you can earn. And you can actually earn like double or triple the number of days that you're actually in prison. I mean, so in a month, you can actually earn 60 or 90 days off your sentence for the time that you do, depending on the type of inmate you are and the classes that you take and the programs you volunteer for and whatnot.
So if you do 10 years, you might get 30 years off your sentence.
Yeah, easily.
So how does okay? I mean, that's one of the great mysteries of life is because we know out here there was stuff going on, some shit going on when COVID happened. They were releasing a cop killer out here in Virginia that just irked a lot of people. Just some weird stuff going on, but this is all pre-COVID stuff. I mean,
oh, you bet, long
10
time
years.
before COVID.
So did they say that did something happen where they said the judge's ruling was excessive, or was all of this done at the Department of Corrections?
My understanding is it was through the Department of Corrections. I don't recall hearing from anybody. And now, to be completely honest, I haven't researched that part of the sentencing through the court system, but I was never made aware that we were reassessing the severity of the sentence through the court system by the district attorney's office at the time, and I was pretty active with those guys, so I would have assumed they would have talked to me about that.
But she's turned her life around. Hallelujah! Found Jesus, found a job, and what was she doing in Tulsa?
She was working at a homeless shelter in Tulsa. The Tulsa World did a huge story about her. It was on the front page. And with a big picture of her and all the good work she was doing. And maybe she was. I actually have reached out. She's still on probation or on parole. She's still on parole, and I've reached out to her parole officer and asked if she would put me in contact with her. But that was I did that about 3 months ago, and she's kind of homeless now, is what I understand. So the parole officer said, well, she checks in with me periodically, and I'll let her know that you've asked to talk with her, but I can't tell you that she will. And they weren't willing to call her in for me or anything. So,
what would you have talked to her about?
I'm interested to know what if she remembers. Cause she may not remember, but if she remembers what was going through her mind that day, I'm certain that we were just seconds away from a shootout. But I'd like to know, what was going on in her mind now and what she thought since then. I mean, is she, is this really? I mean, has she turned her life around? Has she taken those efforts to heart and really tried to do something different, or is that just lip service? And
well, she's homeless now. That's just one step closer to getting back into meth or something else.
Oh, you bet.
Right, easy income. I read an article here while we were talking, and it says that the Pardon and Parole Board made a recommendation to commute her sentence, and the governor back then in 2006, Brad Henry, approved their recommendation. And this is what kind of bothers me. Lorenz is among thousands of Oklahomans convicted of nonviolent crimes.
Oh, yeah.
Did they not read the part where she had the two guns under the pillow?
And a prior possession of a sawed-off shotgun, and
and related to a previous murder. Maybe she wasn't the murderer, but she was a suspect in it. She was arrested, but eventually released. And even she says that she was arrested more than 80 times, and it's quoted, "It was crazy. I was the world's worst drug dealer." And yet they commuted her sentence. It just boggles your mind when these boards of I don't know if you call them do-gooders or what, but good Lord, look at the facts. Don't just think, okay, well, she was convicted to two. She's got 2 life sentences plus 600 years or whatever the hell it was. I mean, it's ridiculous. And they commuted her at 10 years. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, and kind of interestingly enough, Jerry Hill didn't have the history she had. Jerry actually served more time. He actually did more time than she did. Not by just a little bit. He did years more than she did.
You can't make this shit up.
Yeah.
You're not kidding. You are not kidding.
Well, let's end this now on a different kind of note too, because we wanted to, Murph, you brought this up too. Kind of set the stage for us about what you found out, then let's have Wayne talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I wanted to point out is we know you're not only involved in how you and I got to meet each other. You're not only involved in still in investigations, but you're also part of an organization out there. If you can tell us a little bit about that. I might be the organization on my T-shirt right now.
Absolutely. So, I'm the current past president for the Association of Oklahoma Narcotic Enforcers, A1 for short.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You did that just to be different but all I can think of is steak sauce. We're A1. Hey, we're 57. Yeah.
Everybody wants to do that. Everybody is either, CNOA, ANOA, KNOA. We're A1.
A1.
And so we're a little bit different. Let's see. So that organization started in 1989. I've been a member since 1990. And just because some of the guys that are in this group with me, I like to rub it in a little bit. I'm actually the first 2-time president of the association. One of my buddies was trying to beat me to that. I really didn't intend to do that, but that's how it worked out. And so that's a group that provides training, narcotics training, and really just a variety of training for law enforcement officers across the state of Oklahoma. And we have an annual training conference every year, the first week of August. Everybody wants to come to Oklahoma in August. I promise you. You get the opportunity to have 104 degree temperatures and 96% humidity, and it's a great place to hang out.
Sounds like
that's why you invited Javier and I out there, huh? Nobody else would accept, so you brought Javier and I out there.
There you go. You
during COVID, by the way.
Yeah, you can only con so many people into making that trip.
You got me once.
Yeah,
fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, just pay me, and I don't care.
Right. So yeah, I've been with them, involved with that group for a long time, and
that's the Association of Oklahoma Narcotics Enforcers, right?
Yeah, the Association of Oklahoma Narcotic Enforcers.
I had to look at that several times before I can remember what the name of your organization was. You made it difficult.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been involved with that group for a long time, and because of that, I'm friends with. I've gotten the opportunity to be friends with people all over the country. It's a great a great way to network with folks and just build relationships. And met Kevin Black through that
yeah, we understand you keep
organization.
trying to steal him out to Oklahoma, and he's not biting yet.
I don't know. I think Kevin's going to make the trip.
He's interested. I mean, you're chumming the water there a little bit. He's nibbling at the bait.
I keep telling my boss that we need to come up with some funding, because he would be a good guy to have in the 12th district where I work. But either that or one of the other guys that's involved in that group, a guy named Andy Simmons, is the sheriff of Muskogee County. So we could make Kevin an Okie from Muskogee.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if you bring Kevin out, you just want to carry some Depends, because he has a history.
And some air freshener.
Yeah, I listened to that episode. I actually had to pull over. I was laughing so hard I was about to crash. About to have a wreck.
You got to love Kevin, man. He's an outstanding investigator. He's got a sense of humor that never gets old.
No.
And his story is just unbelievable as well.
He's a great guy.
Speaking of stories, let's talk about that.
Yeah. We had Brian Serber here on Game of Crimes, who works in the same office you do. And just when I was Googling you this morning and came across an article that Brian had written, just a little blog about someone in your family that had written a book, and it just kind of struck a chord in my heart. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. My niece, Abigail, my little brother, one of my little brothers, I'm the oldest of 7. My oldest little brother, Duke, and his wife, Cynthia, had a daughter named Abigail. Duke's actually a retired Tulsa police officer. And Abigail passed away about 3 years ago. She developed a fatal heart arrhythmia and passed away. Before she had died, she had written a book. And boy, I'm going to be an awful uncle, and I'm not going to remember the name.
We're going to give it to you: The Adventures of Someone Ordinary Who Become Extraordinary.
Yes. She had written that book. She was 13 years old. She wrote that cover to cover on her own. My brother and my sister-in-law are adamant about the fact that they didn't help her with that story. They might help her with certain punctuations or things like that. But the story originally is hers alone. She wrote it, and after she passed away, they had that published. Now, not for necessarily. I mean, they weren't trying to sell it. It was something they put together so that the family could share that book, could have that book, and just have that as a way to remember her. They have sold quite a few copies, but the proceeds that they get from that book, they actually use that through their church and send kids to camps, and that's nothing they accept any profit from. But it's a good book. I've read it. It's pretty amazing that she wrote that.
Yeah, and I think it's fantastic. I'm looking; it's still available on Amazon if you're interested in the paperback version. The Adventures of Someone Ordinary Who Becomes Extraordinary by Abigail Stinnett.
Yeah.
We will be purchasing that book, and I've got a feeling my granddaughters will be getting a copy of that when Christmas rolls around.
And Murph, I think we're going to make an exception. I think what we'll do in honor of Abigail and her memory. I think what we'll do is on our book page, we'll put that link to that book for this episode.
Fantastic.
And we'll put that up on the book page, and we'll let everybody know how they can get it. We'll put a link to it, link it to the Amazon, and make sure everybody, if they want to get it, they can download it and support that cause.
I tell you what, at 13 years old, I probably still had trouble spelling my name correctly. Here's a young lady has
at
written
87, you still got problems spelling your name correctly.
Just call me Sam. I don't know, whatever the hell you want to call me.
Just don't ask him to call 911 there, Wayne.
199.
199. Abigail was an amazing young lady. She absolutely was. She was always always full of smiles. When when after she passed, there was a group of people that got together and they actually had a bench made with her name on it that sits in front of the school, in front of the choir room at the school. She liked to sing. She was in the choir, and so it's out there with some flowers and some things around it for the kids to be able to sit on and just help keep her memory alive.
Absolutely, brother. That's man. It's very touching. I'm glad that you've had a crazy life. I mean, people you're dealing with out there, they're everywhere, right?
Oh, all over.
But to end up with a special young lady like this, whose life was cut short way too young, but she left a mark on everybody. And here's an opportunity that people can still help others. So don't be bashful. Spend your hard-earned dollars out there and get a copy of this book and support a good cause.
Yeah. So, hey, Wayne, brother, we got to bring this to a close. But before we do, this is us saluting you, saying, first of all, thank you for serving the people of Oklahoma. Thank you for serving A1 sauce to Murph. Free T-shirts. But we want to, but really too, big help. Thank you so much for helping us with getting intros to people. Some great episodes because of you. So we owe you, sir. This is us saluting you, saying thank you for what you do and thank you for coming on here and telling your story.
Well, I'm happy to do it. I appreciate what you guys are doing. I know for a lot of people, these episodes, these stories are entertaining. But the way those stories get presented, I've listened to all of them, and my family are fans for sure. But the way those are presented is just an opportunity to tell the real story, really what goes on with law enforcement and how those different events have affected the lives of people that have been involved. And I'm appreciative of what you guys are doing.
Brother, it's been an honor to have you on here, Wayne. I know you and I will continue to stay friends for the rest of our lives, and we'll stay in touch with each other. Thank you for your support. That's the whole purpose of Game of Crime, is to show the world the heroes that are out there, the sacrifices that you make, not only you, but your families, the bravery, the expertise, the dedication to serving your fellow man. So been an honor to have you on here, brother. It really has.
Well, thank you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Don't go anywhere. We're bringing this to a close. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief. Well, Murph, I told you there was a tie-in between our small town police blotter, some of the weird laws, like you can't keep pigs over 32 inches in there. I was trying to find a law that says you can't keep Cayman crocodiles in there and raise them for boot leather.
Give them a chance. Once this episode comes out, it'll probably be enacted into a new law out there. I mean, think about that. What kind of moron does that? He's waiting till he gets big enough to get a pair of boots out of.
By the time you get through feeding this guy for 4 years, this reminds me of Silence of the Lambs. I mean, he's getting his last victim, to create his human dress. By the time you get through raising this crocodile and all the chicken and meat you fed it, you could have gone out and bought a custom-made pair of boots for 1/10 the price. But
exactly. But I mean, I think about that. Now you're doing. I think they were doing a knock and talk, right? Not a search warrant. But when they went in,
they had some, information.
You pull the shower curtain back, and there's a damn alligator.
They did a trash pull. They got a warrant, and that's how they went to the house. So we talked about that, right? So what fun, right?
Wayne, I'll tell you, brother, that's one I never did. I never. That's fantastic, though.
Oh, man. Well, hey, guys, and the other thing, too, is not every story is about big city, huge cases, that make the news. This is the stuff that goes – this is the meat and potatoes of society. This is the stuff that goes on in every community around the United States. And these are the real stories out there. So, this is us. Again, we saluted Wayne. I mean, the difference between the big towns and the smaller towns, you got to live around the people you arrest 24/7. You will run into them. Yeah. You will see them. Big towns, you might work in one district and one precinct, never see anybody from that area because you're living, 15, 20 miles away, and you'll never see them.
And it's proof that no matter what size town or city you live in, crime is everywhere. And I tell you what, we take our hats off to Wayne for your life of service to your community out there. The man has no plans of giving up here. He's continuing with his professional law enforcement career. He's one of these guys that sets the standards that others trying to live up to. So, Wayne, a true honor to have you on here, and a real honor to call you our friend.
And I hear he's starting up a competitive conference to the A1 conference. It's going to be called Heinz 57.
Oh, that's terrible. That was terrible. Wayne, you
A1, if you heard of the story, stands for the our Association of Oklahoma Narcotics Enforcers. So they had to come up. So it's called A1.
Yeah. And you know what? I can never remember what the A1 stands for. That's why I just say it's the Oklahoma Narcotics.
It's the Steak Sauce Conference. There we go, guys. Well, if you enjoyed this, head on over to Apple Podcasts, hit those 5 stars. Apple and Spotify, it's magic. We don't know exactly how it works. It's David Blaine, David Copperfield, Penn and Teller. It just works, right? Also, head on over to GameOfCrimesPodcast.com for more information about the show, especially to how. Make sure you order the book. The book is The Adventures of Someone Ordinary Who Became Extraordinary by Abigail Stinnett, and it's coming out on her birthday, so it can't get any better than that. Follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, head on over to Game of Crimes Fans. Answer a couple questions, and the Mafia Queen, Sandy Salvato, will allow you entrance into the inner sanctum. But also, go check us out, patreon.com/Game of Crimes, right, Murph? We do our 911 episode we just released. We're doing review of season 1 and 2 of Narcos, which we've never done. We've done Blow. Right. We've done a lot of other stuff, but we did it on Patreon. We did a 12-dep, but that was the real story of Pablo. This is the first time we've actually ever reviewed the Narcos series. And we're finding out.
And I'm glad you said that, because I just want them to know it's not a repeat of something we've already done. It's different.
This is different. And what's different about it? It's the real story of Murph, what he did over there. It's like 99% accurate, right, Murph? Oh, don't answer. They'll have to listen to the Patreon episode to find out. There you go. See, that's a tease. All right.
Love it.
So, hey, but seriously, we really appreciate what you do for us. We really, really appreciate your support. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. So again, just drop over there, Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars, and we appreciate it. And thank you guys once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes.